Yeah, on whatever section you're sort of looking at. It's just that I got a laptop, so I'm trying to flip between two screens and follow you is a little challenging.
Yeah, I'm just George. I'm just gi giving like a general
Go through.
overview, and then I can go over some of the topics as we follow. Just some things that I remember that highlighted that came to my mind. So we had experienced data managers in the group, and we had some people that had less experience that were more listening and understanding, in not less experience in terms of scientific background, but in terms of managing data in of marine life. What else? Let me think here from the comments. Okay, about some of the challenges. So they highlighted that sometimes we may scare people when we say all like the data requirements once, and sometimes those steps may be slower or so it would depend on the strategy that different regions might just not do because they think it's too much work. They don't understand the value. So also there was a talk about showcasing. I think this is talk that has been going on, but you was present. So getting people involved in all the process of data, that they would understand why we are organizing and planning these observations. So why it's important to do that, what are the benefits that we gain, especially in terms of analyzing the data and giving proper indicators for decision making in terms of managing marine ecosystems and endangered species. What else? Let me see. There are random comments here. I didn't filter because people was posting, so it's important that we got everyone.
Yeah, no, Carolina, maybe because we've heard these comments, so I think it's good that you captured them. But we've all heard these comments. So how are you going to move forward with the synthesis of these workshops? Can we help you? I mean, how are you going to take all this information and answer some of these questions or provide some incentives for people
In
to
several of them, there is already the solution, so they might not be clear here, but some of them are in the recordings. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to merge the ideas and then capture the solution too. So the problem, the best practices that were unisonous, and then the solutions. Okay, so there was some, and this is, but do you have other suggestions, Frank?
No, I mean, I'm wondering, one of the things that we want to encourage is people to develop best practices or protocols that can be deposited in the ocean best practices system and that other people can find it easily. It's or you develop a publication and then it gets deposited in the ocean best practices system.
Yes,
But
there was a comment about publication. So like today, they said this conversation came along about that would be important to dedicate, like they didn't agree on a paper or something like that, unifying these problems that might be very specific to places that with less resources. So there was a comment and people were willing to join. So we might propose in the end, like in the further weeks, but not within the workshop, we wouldn't have time. But to think about that, and also putting like it would be a way to review some of the best practices, and if there is material available, because for instance, I'm not aware of the specific literatures dealing with best practices in under-resourced. You know, like it's something that I haven't read, but just because it might not that doesn't exist, it's just not the literature that I'm reading. So yeah, there was this conversation. Do you think paper is the best, manuscript is the best tool?
Well, it's a place to start, because no matter what, you have to write something up if you want to share it. It doesn't have to be long, but it has to be concise and sharp and clear, and provide some solutions.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are talking about this now, even in the Ocean Best Practices group. There's a task team that is looking at under-resourced countries, but they're very focused on Africa right now, and they're not focused on biodiversity. But I wonder if, and so you cannot cover everything. So how do you focus this in maybe one method or one type of data?
There was a challenge also. So I was trying, when they were talking, I was always trying to like get the subject towards being more specific on marine biodiversity. So there was a challenge. I thought like everyone was thinking about marine biodiversity because it's their expertise, but we were not very able to, maybe in the conversation, to be so specific in terms of that. So sometimes I would bring topics like, for instance, fisheries. It was something that they touched a little bit, endangered species also, but there was a challenge separating what would be specific for marine biodiversity, as we see in many of publications and things that have already touched this topic. And here, you know, like it seems that it was hard to separate from the other EOVs, for instance. But let's see what else.
But I think it's very natural for people to think, especially in under-resourced places, to think about something practical like fisheries. You know, I think that, or endangered species, because that ultimately is what may attract some resources for conservation or for better management or to eat, you know. So, but I think that there's a role for biodiversity measurements there, especially if you're trying to plan for conservation. You need to know what's there, or if you have a marine protected area or some conservation measure that you want to use in a sustainable way, you need to monitor it. And so there may be ways to focus on some biodiversity metric that allows you to do that. And the thing is that it's not like temperature, which doesn't matter where you go, you measure temperature. But here it may be different everywhere you go, what you need to measure. And so providing some guidance on if you're going to look at aquaculture, here are some things that would be useful. If you're going to, you know, we're not going to solve the problem of the big fisheries at the moment, and although that may be important, but there's lots of sustainable or unsustainable local fisheries, artisanal fisheries, and they need to know what's the resources, what can they fish, what is it changing, and many local communities don't have that knowledge, no, but they're fishing. So if there's a way to somehow collect the data that they're collecting from fishing, that may be useful. But and I've seen several groups that are trying to do that.
Yeah, there was a comment on that. Also, a lot of the discussion was, from my perspective, was kind of going around the long-term sites, maybe because also we had Shirley from the Ceylon in the South Africa and other representatives from long-term institutions. So it was very biased on that. They just tackled fisheries, but they said about that, like on the, but I think what was a hard thing is for them to bring the solutions. So as other discussions, like as we tend to brainstorm the challenges first and proper solutions, maybe there wasn't enough time also because the topics were different. And
Yeah.
they
But I
also
think that
talked about infrastructure, a lot on infrastructure, about so the problem about maintaining data infrastructure in those LTER sites, and also maintaining personnel on. So they said about like as the long-term sites tend to have more permanent people, but it may change also around, for instance, in Brazil is not like that because they rely on postdocs, and so there was also something on this.
So let me just make a comment adding to Frank's. I think the questions are known now. I think the solutions are not known. And having a paper which is traditionally a perspectives paper, so it's not a research paper, it's not a methods paper. And whether you publish or not, that's not the issue, but they're typically only some number of pages long because most people won't read them. In the case of perspectives in Frontiers, it's 3,000 words, which, if you, that's going to be 5 or 10, maybe a little more. This is really the crux of the matter, is to begin to build a consensus on solutions. And maybe that's an interesting thing to talk about here. If you pick one of the issues, Carol, and pick one of them, and let's talk about how you approach solutions for that one issue. So we're not trying to solve the world. Whatever's on your stack of tags there.
For instance, provide a data efficient infrastructure. So as we see in our site, like when we relied on international surveys and things like that. So when we envision, we know exactly what we wanted in terms of data. We built, so we didn't spend a lot of resources on data infrastructure. We could build something that was more efficient. It would cover the life cycle, building on partners and the existing things. Sure that we are not very complex. The infrastructure in our site for acquiring the marine data is not like, I don't know, totally high tech, but it closes the cycle. So for instance, it would be a topic that it comes to mind as provide these efficient data that are planned to have already. So we know exactly the variables that we want to have as a product, and we build on the top of that our planning, like we did the end, how do you say, the backwards. What else? Let me see here. Okay, so another thing that was a problem that we may have some solutions, so that data management work overload is expanding. So all the sites shared about that. So they seem that a lot of the data sets from the marine biodiversity are starting to stack and to pile, and not just in terms of data that were collected in former projects, but things that are like currently as people get more efficient. And So one solution is seeing that from anticipating this work overload and planning to have a bigger team. So this is something, even with under-resourced, so we were thinking about training younger is what we are doing, for instance, in our LTER. You know, since we cannot hire a lot of people because you don't have resources to hire someone with more experience, that we have trained and like as we do, for instance, when we are in the field and we are training students to deal with manually do surveys and things like that. We are starting to test those protocols together, the least experienced, but could be able to automatize part of the work in data management, at least the ones that it would be more manual, that is data curation and quality control. Also reviewing the routines and things like that. What else? There's some solutions that come to my mind, but and the ones that we talked actually. There was also this challenge about also the large amount of data, but from former projects. So I don't remember who said that, but I think it's someone from the Spanish side of the regions, and so he said that the best practices that they have is that they don't start, they try a balance between what is new data and what is former data, because they know they can't have they do both, digitalize both and on the same pace. So they prioritize and see which are more urgent to decisions to manage the territory and things like that. Let's see here. A lot of people talk about language, so language being a barrier, but I think this is for everything. And there wasn't really a solution, but people are testing already. I know OBPS is testing some of the tools to automatize translation and even for curation of the data sets that come in different languages, but it is still centralized in the nodes. It's not something that we can solve prior, so we were thinking about solutions that could be implemented before the data arrives in the data centers. Technology, the data. Yeah, also, I think it was Amy from Antarctica OBPS that she said about the resources that are limited to the duration of the project, but the data work goes beyond that for many years. I can't come up with a solution about that. I'm open for suggestions, but I think we didn't find.
Well, that's what we talked about the other. I think that there has to be a change in the culture and the kind of workshop you have done with Enrique, the training, the stuff we did with pole to pole. People need to get the data formatted and ready to share as soon as they collect the data. If they wait, then the data is gone. And that's the problem, because it becomes nobody's going to go back after even months to reformat the data. And so a lot of the data is lost.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Frank. And I think this orientation has not been so clear everywhere, you know, like I think maybe it's because the problem has been like already in course. So I think this is one first recommendation, and sometimes we forget to say that, and also we don't apply that. Like we are changing things in the lab, for instance, in our lab, it's not all standardized to be already published in OBPS from data acquisition, and so I think it's like when you said about that yesterday, I was with that in mind. And but about the workshops, I don't know if you have this data. I didn't ask Henrique about, but we are going to try to evaluate the efficiency also about these workshops. So how many, like in terms of time, how many data sets really get uploaded and how people get involved, because there are also like a lot of energy and work spending on training people. So we want to test different, maybe here in Brazil, test different formats and see which one is more efficient in terms of what is the problem that we want to address, if it's the more amount of data, or if we want people to understand the whole data process in terms of marine biodiversity. So I don't know if you have measured that in the events that you because I know that there are several in the US, and we were, and it was something that I was in my head, like I said, okay, we did that, it was amazing, it was wonderful, okay, but and then like if we have to do again, how many of them we would need to do, and how much, so what is the positive impact? Sure, always have, but like to balance what is the format and things that would be more appropriate in terms of training and
Yeah, I don't know, Ana Carolina. I mean, in the past, we have invited the same people again to our second workshop to try to see in other cases, we work with NOAA to see if they can get a little bit of money through the regional associations of the integrated ocean observing system. But then some did something, some didn't do anything, and then the money dried out, and so they stopped. So it's not easy. I think that there's no, I don't know how much time you need to spend trying to see how many people follow up. I think it's important to stay in contact with them and offer help, or find a way that a centralized group can provide assistance, because that's what we find is that people will not do it unless somebody does it for them, or if they get a little bit of money.
yeah.
But and then you will have a few, maybe less than 1 or 2% that will continue to do it on their own. But to actually measure that, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that you just keep working with the same people, maybe try to expand the circle
So
slowly.
what we saw here is that since this last training was focused on the LTER sites, and they are required to share their data through Darwin Core and the national or OBIS, or so that effort, we know it already has the impact. So we are already seeing, and this was a conversation that it has been along. So we see that amount of energy is not in vain,
Wasted,
like of
yeah.
being
Yeah.
wasted. And so that's one strategy that we thought, not sure just focus on the LTER, but working on the existing networks already that are willing to share, that already have this think about. So it was this perspective we know it's going to have, because they have to share their data, and they're already sharing actually. some of them, and the others are not. So it was a good moment. So they would stop. And so I don't know how it's in the other regions, but it's the perspective.
Well, not all LTERs want to share around the world. I mean, the thing that I agree with you, we should find maybe targeted groups, like you say. We want to target the LTER or this network because you know that they're willing to be more open, or they have a long time series. So be very, not just invite randomly, but be very purposeful and inviting people that you know you will have an impact when you train them. But the other thing, my concern with training the LTER people is it's just a bunch of scientists doing their own science with no application. And so part of the effort in this ocean decade, and part of what we want to do with MBON, is solve problems, that require biological data. And that is more difficult maybe, but you may need, like George was saying, maybe work with communities and do citizen science, or do target other groups, but you do it because you need to solve a problem. And we haven't done that very effectively, is identifying groups that have a serious problem that requires biological data. So how do we do that is a question, because we can work with scientists all along, and they can continue measuring LTERs for 100 years, and they'll publish a couple papers that only a couple people will read, and that's it.
Yeah, in terms, I don't know, I totally agree with you. In specifically the case of Brazil, the LTRs are the ones generating the most amount of data about biodiversity that has been applied to manage, because they are all within marine protected areas. But this is very particular. So, but I totally see what you're saying. Like I agree. One thing that we tested, but then it's not related to marine biodiversity, but I think it could be a model, and we may try next year, is that, so I have a friend that has a citizen science microplastics monitoring. So she started and blah, blah. And she got a grant from the UN accelerator in Cabo Verde. And she asked me to provide a course in citizen science and data sharing as general. So in many aspects. And what we saw, so we had people from totally different backgrounds. The least of them were scientists. And so I had to prepare the course in a language. First, it was in Portuguese. And second, it was in terms that were not, and we had a very good feedback from that in Cabo Verde. So they want to expand, for instance, for the whole monitoring, and a lot because of this data, because we could talk to other people besides, and I don't know the effects or the impacts of that measuring, like, and how this information got back. But so it was different for us to do that, but I haven't seen either in terms of marine biodiversity, like, and even for the other ones, it was very hard to find material that would be in the language that would achieve citizens that are not technical or don't have a technical background, because the network relies on volunteers and collaborators. So many of them, they don't have a sense, but it was important to give that, because they had to have a minimal understanding of the importance of the standardized and the data flow, because they were part of the network, and they have to acquire the data. Like his microplastic has a lot of, I don't know, whatever, it's not so easy to sample. So, and so I think it was a good experience, and having the material back, like for us, at least now when we have to train the students for OBPS, part of that course I can already use, because it was more general, talking about ocean data. And so it would be like, and but it was a model that we may try to reproduce here at some sites, but adapt then to Darwin Core, because I don't know, I think that the language Darwin Core is not so easy to translate also. I don't know, I have a hard time explaining and being very didactic. I remember the first time I got in touch with that, it was a challenge, but there are people to help. I don't know. Yeah. Let's see here. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I also took some notes here. I'm gonna add about that, going beyond the scientists. We tend to focus because we think they are the main providers, but they are not. And I think on the first meeting of the OBPS that we did on the 12th, we talked a lot about involving having
Yeah,
citizens.
so I'm glad that you have some solutions to some of these questions, but so I think it would be good to see, and I assume you're gonna do something like that, where you're gonna collect these questions, challenges, and pair them up with some of the solutions. And
We
I
already
think
have material on that also, Frank. So from these workshops and meetings, we gathered a lot of information. So besides that, for instance, to write a paper or something, we already have like a broader perspective touching a lot of people. And so we might have content for solutions and not just have one view, you know, from like, I don't know, Brazil or something. That would be too biased.
Okay.
Do you think, what do you think is the main, it would be a good strategy to reach more people outside of our networks, and like, should we circulate those searches? Should we get more meetings before we, I don't know, write something?
Well, I mean, it would be good, I think, to have a list of benefits. Why would people benefit from doing anything like this at the scientific level, or at the laboratory level, technical level, or at the management level, you know, or the public citizen level? And it doesn't have to be long. Something, the shorter the better, but having a list of benefits of why monitoring life would be good, and why it's important to have standards, and what are the benefits of sharing data. I think that's important, and finding ways to publish that in different networks, you know, and involve. So we have some networks. We have MBON, Marine Life 2030. There's all the others, things that the Decade is doing. I don't know if that's very effective. I mean, the Decade has so many things that they post on that website that they have, that it's impossible to find anything. So I'm not sure how useful that is, but there are maybe more targeted groups, like you say, well, sharing it with the LTERs, and there's an international LTER office, or focusing on some fisheries groups. Like, there are small fisheries associations that are starting to be very active internationally, but they're not involved with us because they don't, you know, why would they, what solution do we provide to their problem? Their problems are political, resource limitations, you know, fish limitations. So if we connect with them that in a way that is beneficial to them, then we may see some traction.
You need to do that where you're not conquering the world. So it's a targeted 2 or 3 customer set.
Yeah.
Specific solutions, which then can be used as a demonstration. There's a group, Frank, you know them, the Bicodemo group, that said the information from the cruises science cruises wasn't coming into a uniformly accessible place, and it wasn't coming in a timely fashion. And they started out saying, that's the problem. This is the way we want to work it. They did work it. And then there became to be apparent other problems having to do with management of sensors and timely calibration, et cetera. And they began to work that. And so they built up what is now really a sizable program through the National Science Foundation funding. I wonder if there's a way to not that scale or anything, but to take 2 or 3 pilots that you can use and declare success on, and then go ahead and we'll build that into something that really makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I think that the LTER is a good example. I'm not trying to say that it isn't, and we should, because Brazil is very engaged in the international LTER program, and maybe that's a channel because I have tried to talk to other LTERs here in the US, and they don't want to do it. You're really, I mean, they put a lot of complaints. They don't want to change their data formats to Darwin Core. They've been doing it this way. They know what they do because they're good data managers and they serve their community. So working with the International LTER office, and I think Brazil is very involved with that office, would be a good idea. But that's a science program. The time series that Bicodemo serves, Jay, are another problem. This is the conversation we had with Heather Benway the other day. Mm-hmm. And I'm part of that conversation. And you talk to the time series in Hawaii, and you talk to the time series in Germany. In Germany, they wanted to do it, and so they went, but they did it for carbon measurements. Then another one of the European time series in the Canary Islands said, no, we're not going to do it. We're out. Goodbye. And they even disengaged from the conversation. The people in Hawaii say they don't want to do it because it's too costly. They're not going to change what they're doing because somebody has to do it, and they don't have the resources. So it's a bandwidth issue. It's always the same thing. So to me, the only way this is going to change if it's top down, or maybe both. We push from one side, but eventually the program managers have to say, you want funding, you have to do this.
We have been seeing also, Frank, here, and that's all new from the new conversations that we had with the technical people from the state environmental agencies. And so we see also a movement here in Brazil in organizing this data, not the data, scientific data, but mainly the data that comes from the impact assessments that are like here in Brazil, as in the US and everywhere, there are like all those big studies, and this data get lost because the companies don't want to share. And so we see some key states along Brazil that are already, so they are already implementing a system, because there is a national system, not for biodiversity, but for the environmental data. And so like we have been talking to them in trying to to connect, try a way to interoperate those systems and the languages. But there was something that it also came and they were very interested in understanding how Darwin Core works, because they said they had standards for all the other variables, but they didn't have for marine biodiversity and other biodiversity, like they kind of didn't know. And so we have been seeing, it's amazing how you already see this data there. It's not something that they're imagining. No, Ceará, for instance, that has a big amount of data, also from the LTERs and things like that. They already organized where we are, Espírito Santo. So it's also like we saw as some strategy, so people that we would reach, because they have data beyond what is going to be published in papers, because those are data that we would never find unless we would go over the reports. And so they said, and they saw it as a necessity because they couldn't, as they are small staffs in those states, they also couldn't go over all the reports that they had. So they prefer to digitalize everything, so it would be easier for them to find the information that they
Right.
wanted. So I don't know how it is in other countries, but we see some movement here, not every state, but so it might be easy. And I asked, for instance, some of them, okay, do you think they would be willing to share or connect this data to OBS and the other data to, for instance, the other systems? And all of them said yes. Like, yeah, sure, why not? The data is already there, it's digital already.
That's
So
great.
it's free, yes. So it might be also like a way. But it would be good to talk to other people. Like sometimes I feel that we know a lot about our reality here, and when we try to target, is, I don't know, important to hear from the Pacifics, and so from Asia also how they are doing, and so on.
Well, I mean, we have some channels to do that. You know, we work with the MBON, we have the webinar series. I don't know if you've been on that, on
Some, yeah.
Networking Fridays, and we dedicate one Friday a month to biodiversity, but it's very hard to find speakers. You know, we have had a very hard time people committing to, I think a lot of people are tired of Zoom meetings, you know. So
Totally.
uh,
We can't
yeah,
stand Zoom anymore.
but that's the channel, and we have newsletters with Jay and with MBON. And there's Goose newsletters. Goose has a webinar. I mean, those have the problem is that they reach only scientists mainly. The Networking Fridays from the Air Center has more reach. I mean, managers have been joining those, and so that's an interesting. It's a different mix of people, and so that's interesting.
Yeah, there was something that we are enforcing here every time we do a meeting. We never, so we always split between more than one sector, even that, because scientists always want to, like, they're the ones also interested. But when we have limited amount of like slots, we are always putting the managers, and because we
I mean,
see as a view.
if you want to give one of these seminars and bring maybe you and another person, like a manager from an LTER that actually use the data to solve a problem in one of the marine protected areas, that would be very good, you know.
Yeah.
And I'll be happy to set that up for you. And we would, I think that would be very interesting for a lot of people.
I'm taking some notes so I remember to reach out to you.
No, just send me an email. But if
Yeah.
you, I don't know, if Laguna de Patos or one of your LTERs,
Yeah.
where you actually solve the problem using biological data.
Yeah.
Those examples are very valuable.
Yeah, all of them. There was we got, so yeah, I will also see there was so we are here in this event, and it was a moment that also we tried to get people from all the marine LTRs, and there is a magazine doing an article. It's a FAPESP, so it's going to be reach about those contributions, so how we are using this data. So I'm gonna get, because I have to read all of them, but it was very clear that they were the main data providers to the management of these coastal areas where they are in a regional scale. And it was nice to see that. We don't see that because nobody says. And so yeah, like people tend to complain a lot and they don't, but yeah, it was nice to see. Let's see. I guess that's
I need to close or get out of this call. in a
I
few
mean, yeah,
minutes.
I was gonna ask you also if we could leave a bit earlier, if since here's just of us. I have I will fly. I have to get the bus to my town because I fly tomorrow back to Victoria. So if it's
Okay.
okay with you, George, do you want to
Yeah,
say
yeah.
Yeah,
anything?
no, I'm quite content listening. I mean, you guys are light years ahead of me on on most of these topics. I've got my little niche and carved out and trying to rally everybody behind you. I do have just one, I'm going to call it principal staging question. When we say best practices and solutions, have we got a methodology, a plan, a strategy, a tactic yet to say, okay, what, who's designating that's a best practice or not? And or is there can we come up with some group organization thing where we have those that are the subject matter experts that began to give it from 1 to 5 stars? This practice we would put as a 5-star practice for corals or mangroves or whatever. This is just a 3-star practice. This is a 1 or this is a 0. Don't do, kind of thing. So I don't know. Again, I'm just
George,
more-
there's a very good point. Frank, would you like to answer before you leave, or do you want me to?
Well, that's part of
Or
what we
Jay?
asked this workshop. We asked exactly that question, that people should talk about that for this workshop.
Yeah.
And give us ideas, or, I mean, it's not us. The workshop is to get ideas for the people doing this stuff and identifying an endorser, and that could be anybody. It could be, the new institute in Brazil. For some countries like to do that for themselves. Like the first day, the people from Australia said, we decided that Australia is going to endorse its own practices if you want funding. So that's what they do. They don't want to depend on another country or group telling them what to do. And that may be valid. There may be other places where the Global Ocean Observing System may be the endorser, but you need to ask them, are they willing to stand up at a review process? So I think that anybody that has some credibility could be an endorser for that particular community. And it has to be somebody that has credibility in the community. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And
So-
in terms of the system, also the ocean best practices systems, where some of those best practices are being deposited, like I'm sure there are many still that are going to, but George, so you can also, so there is also ways that you can not rank, but at least you can comment, and when you fill out, when you're putting, for instance, endorsing a best practice, you can scale and what is the application. So it's very clear how you can see. It's easier now to see what, for instance, is the scope, or what is the coverage, what is the scale that the practice is being like for whose situation, kind of, but the systems helps the person to make those decisions. At least the last time we published one, that I saw a lot of change, and it was very good, because it would be easier for the person to see, like not just be general. No, I like we could publish everything, and so there's also these strategies of ways that people can endorse, or community can give a feedback, and not like, I don't know, random or something. You can say it's a best practice, and just because someone said, or like that, it has the freedom, but it also allows the feedback from the community, the scientific community, yet not many.
I think half of that was a question or a comment, what was a question, and really just a potential question of, and in this case, ignorance. I mean, I just haven't gone and dug into the Forum Decade website that's radically improved from what we first had in 2017 to what we've got now in the forum. I mean, it's like dramatic, but again, it's like the same thing we see with the people we're trying to help. There's just so much overload that there may be that the best practice ranking system may exist. I just didn't know about it. So that's what I'm saying. Half of that may have been a question, half of it a comment of, does this something like this already exist? Sounds like it doesn't, and or we wouldn't be having a meeting trying to get everybody to feed in how can we do this? And so how do we? It's the same chicken egg question. Who's going to tell us it's a best practice, or who do we nominate to tell us best practice and what's now? It's variables, and it's got all the old crystal tower, ivory tower legacy paradigms still hanging on.
Jay, Frank, do you know how is this talk within the decade to use the OBPS as? Do you think there is a connection in this? How it is? Because I haven't gone in all of the ocean decade.
Well, the OBPS was endorsed by the decade as a program.
Yeah.
So, the decade is just a label.
Yeah, I know.
It's a networking mechanism. It doesn't provide any funding. It's just it's for us to use the way we want to increase visibility. So Jay wrote a proposal. It got endorsed as a program, but it's the same OBPS. There is no change. It's just now it has a little bit of a little star. So you're part of the decade.
No, I know. It's just I was wondering, because I know some of those, maybe as it goes, the decade goes, some of those documents and reports and contributions and best practices might be organized some way. So that was just my curiosity on that. So for instance, I don't see
there is a newsletter you can send, but I've gone into this Ocean Decade forum, and George, I'm glad that you find that useful. I get lost in there. There's so much stuff in there that I can't find anything. Their search mechanism is horrible. And every time I go in there, I spend several minutes trying to figure out even where our own program is.
Oh yeah, no, the Ocean Decade. Yeah, I can't find any of the programs and actions anymore. We used to be able to, but I will recommend. I'll send an email to them we can't find our own programs.
No, I'm not going to worry about that. I think that we direct people to the OBPS. So if we want somebody, it's endorsed. And if we want somebody to publish a best practice in the OBPS, we send them to OBPS directly, not to go through the decade.
Yeah. We are doing that here, and but people sometimes they get lost because everything is in English and so on. But it's okay. It's another problem. That's another problem. We can't just translate to everything.
Yeah, let me
that
make
was just a general comment, Frank, that it's better than what we had in 2017. I didn't say they've got the perfect platform, but it's moving at least it took a step in the right direction of trying to get to form I'm going to call it the Facebook of the ocean without the shit of Facebook in it, just a place for us to find each other. At least it's making an attempt at that, and hopefully, Anna said, we'll keep improving it till we've got something that we can search easy, find easy, blah blah blah.
I hope they do that somehow.
Me too. Me too.
Let me reinforce what Frank said. We have a newsletter that comes out every other month for the best practice system. It's a tool you can use. And if you approach Goose in the right way and the Goose panel, etc., Goose has a very effective monthly or so newsletter. There are some really good ways, once you've crystallized in your mind what you want and how it'll impact people, because that's what the newsletter should say. You have the tools now that are quite good.
Yeah.
The OBPS will help you. And we're interested in capacity building. We're now accepting things in Spanish. We're accepting things in Portuguese. So there are opportunities to communicate with your own community, the local community now, or the continental community that we're enabling. We'll help you take advantage of it, but you need to create the content and the concept that goes underlying that.
We can submit conceptual ideas that we're trying to make happen, Jay, as opposed to, you know,
you have in the repository are practices, methods.
Yeah.
But there's the community building process at which the concepts relating to methods and things should be discussed. And you
Okay.
need to think about how to do those. The informal way is to do it through the newsletters and through documents. The more formal way is to put something in Frontiers in Marine Science as a perspectives article, a short article, which gives you perspectives of the challenges and how to address them. It's up to you. All of those will get visibility.
Maybe do all of them. I mean, think that having newsletters, organizing a group of people to write a more formal paper. But even the Frontiers papers are read by a bunch of scientists. Yeah, so you want to publish another
other media. So one thing that we might I'll work on the contacts and try to close this, but one thing that it would interested us a lot, and we have done here, and the LTRs also have done, and so we are investing a lot, not money, but we are trying to get those opportunities, is to put this discussion in the open media, like in the broad media, like on TV, and like we may not train, so it's not the focus of, you know, I know it is different focus. Nobody wants to be in the TV shows, like we don't want to be there, but we see that it has a big impact on the way people understand. So they had a lot of, like, I don't know, these events have been, people from the media are being invited to be around, and not just everybody, you know, not just media like random media, the ones that have a higher reach. So I think, because I think from papers will not reach, like go beyond, you know.
Yeah. I'm suggesting industry associations, they have their own newsletters. And some of those, maybe like the Marine Technology Society, they have some in reach, but so reaching industry or government publications may be useful.
That's one thing we never thought about, the industry newsletter, Frank. We never send anything.
Like, I'm sure that the Brazilian Petrobras has its own newsletter.
Yeah, sure, they do, and they read.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe put something short there, and we can do that same thing in Mexico, or you know, and find these industry associations. Some are international. Okay, well.
She needs to catch her bus, and again, I'm just lurking anyway, trying to learn from the gurus here. So
thanks, it was clear. Thanks for being here. And I said, Jay, no pressure about that. So that's one time that we learned that it's not a lot of people. Most people prefer the other one. We may change for the next event.
Sorry, I was not at the other ones, and I just came from the office, and it's just been a day full of meetings, and every day is like that. So
you know, but sometimes just fewer people is actually a very effective discussion. So I don't measure quantity, I measure quality.
Yeah, that's a very true statement. Yeah, and this was highly valued quality for me today, gentlemen, and look forward, you know, and I think something, you know. We're looking at what I think is the reality. You either have people who are retired and have resources and stuff to do something like this, or somebody who's in a role being paid to do it, can show up during working hours, after hours, weekends, whatever, or you have some passionate youth who wiggle in occasionally somehow, some way between their life, but in the middle is there's 80% of our passionate people, but they're trying to make $1 to put a taco on the table, so they can't show up for this stuff, and they can't really come and do work and stuff until we got money from it. It's a real chicken and egg nightmare we're in. So
Yeah. But I think it's interesting.
Nice to be in. It's nice to be in company and to sort of literally to validate that I'm not the only one feeling this way, because I do. There are times you go, God, how much longer can we bang our heads up against the wall trying to engage people and inspire them and lift them up with promises and hopes and desires that something's going to come so they can get out and do the field work. That's all they want to do.
But people are doing, like, I don't know, I spent the whole day now with I was moderating an in-person session that the local communities were trying to plan for the next years as blue cities, and it's very good to have people to hear them, like when we go beyond sciences. I think it may be very tiring. I'm very tired today, but I think it is important to hear, because we have a biased voice, these scientists. Like, I don't know, we are a small group. Okay, but I see you around. Monday we have another session. Jay, I'm gonna send Pauline's a summary for today, and on Monday I'm gonna send a document because I know you need that a day before, I think. So on the 17th would be better. So we would miss the last one, but I'll sure send that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. And
Please send me the link.
I just want to encourage you that your boards there with all the comments are really worth integrating and using in the report. You have a lot of material. Actually, you have enough for a substantial report. I think you're in good shape.
No, okay, but for what we're going to say on the 19th, it has to be very short. The essence of what the message is, that can fit in 30 seconds.
We're gonna do that. Yeah, no, the strategy was built like that, to have concise messages.
Okay.
I'm not gonna send you 5-page.
I think that I'm going to disagree with Frank. We have to write a proceedings eventually, and we do
Okay,
need.
but we also have to deliver a message in the plenary. And I don't want to sift through all these stickies to try to figure out what we're going to say in the plenary.
Wait for 5 bullets from each one. Yeah. Okay, Frank, don't worry, I'm not gonna send 2 bullets. Okay, that's bullets. Great. 2 bullets. It's what you say. It's what. Yeah, no, don't worry. We are very good at summarizing.
Jay can read all the stickies if he wants.
No. I'm going to read her report that she gets from the stickies, and I'm going to applaud her report. So we have 2 different needs, and she'll take care of both.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need both.
Thank you all. Have a nice weekend.
You too. Have a nice weekend.
Anna, please send me the link from the morning session, because I still don't know the OBS story fully.
Okay. Do you have the link for the? You have the link for the.
See you. Bye-bye. Have a good
weekend.
weekend.
The drive, I think, don't you?
Bye, guys.
It's the same link. If you have the Google Drive.
Oh, the Google Drive. Okay,
yes,
okay.
Everything is there.
Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you, Angel.
Okay.
Thank you, Jay. Everybody have a great weekend. We need a break. Everybody